Hello, citizens of the Sol System. I did it. I read some bad literature that shouldn't be called literature at all. In search for one of the worst Warhammer books, I had come across some opinions. Firstly, The Battle of Abyss by Ben Counter seemed to be infamously known to be the worst. However, it's part of the Horus Heresy. I wanted a book specifically in the 40k universe. Adeptus Ridiculous went over Ian Watson's Inquisition War. Side note, I went to look up the novel's title and found out the author had died back in April. I didn't think he was that old, and I definitely didn't expect him to be dead. This little burp is quoted from the AI answer, so I don't know how wrong it is. Although initially suppressed by Games Workshop due to internal publishing conflicts and design disagreements, his works were eventually republished by Black Library, with Watson adding in-universe forwards disavowing the text as tales of lies. The canon, but not canon situation. Since Adeptus Ridiculous reviewed Inquisition War, I wanted to review something different. So you won't be hearing me read about sexy gene stealers, which how are they sexy? I don't know. I mean, considering I wouldn't mind getting together with Garrus Volkarian.
Burn the heretic! Kill the mutant! Purge the unclean!
I shouldn't question people's preferences. During my search, I came across a certain author's name, C.S. Goto. I had read a comment he had Terminators do backflips. I had to find out if one of his books were bad literature-wise or lore-wise. Spoiler alert, the novel I read didn't have backflipping Terminators, and not reading all of his books to find that specific moment. I ended up buying Blood Ravens, The Dawn of War Omnius. It's been a while since I purchased the book, but I think it was one of the only ones that's not an ebook. I'm not a fan of reading on a screen for hours on end, or some ridiculous price for being a print. I bought it used on Amazon, it's in alright condition. Now, I didn't read the whole Omnius. I read the first novel, Dawn of War. I knew the novels were interconnected with the game of the same title. It wasn't until I was a quarter of a way through the story I realized it was based on the original campaign. The Cyrene incident seemed familiar, but it wasn't until I read the Chaos Leaders' names that it clicked. So I somehow recognized their names, but not the heroes. When I had played the campaign, it kind of just went in one ear and the other. It was pretty short and basic. I enjoy Winter Assault and Dark Crusade more. The tabs I have aren't pointing out every mistake. Some do, obviously. Others, though, point out lore or things that irked me. Honestly, it's not the worst book I've ever read. Wait until later. Also, I'm not a literature expert, so my reading comprehension isn't the greatest. I mean, I passed English 101 in college, so that has to count for something. Before we dive into it, there's two things I got out of this book. One, I have more respect for the Eldar.
You need to leave!
And two, I want to buy a set of Terminators. Anyway, we're going to start off with the prologue. Yeah, and so it starts off in 38 Millennium, and it's on Tartarus, if that's how it's pronounced right. And so essentially it's the Eldar, the Imperium, and Chaos are on this planet because they're trying to... Well, the Eldar are trying to stop it, the Chaos are trying to activate it, and then the Imperium's just investigating on what's going on and just want to destroy the Eldar and Chaos, as it always is. It starts off with the Eldar trying to fight off Chaos. Anyway, so here's the first sentence. Sheets of the warp energy crack through the night, bathing the mountaintop in dark, purpling light. I did not realize purpling was a word. I thought that was made up, but it is a word. I don't think it's an American thing. I don't remember reading in American literature, so it might just be a British thing.
It is the British way!
The Eldar are fighting the cultists, because they're coming for this relic that they're fighting over. Yeah, and then they had, I think it's pronounced Canes? It's that special avatar the Eldar can, summon. There you go. There's the word summon. Because, they're a dying species. Here, in general, the Eldar could not afford such recklessness. They were once the dominant force in the galaxy, but now they are dwindling race. They had to pick their battles carefully. That sounds lore-wise. It doesn't sound like it's super out of the blue. It doesn't sound like anything like Ian Watson's books. Okay, so Tartarus was not a battle that they could avoid. The Farseer had been preparing it for centuries. Guardian squads had been formed specially, and the Aspect temples had been consented to arm some of their most exalted former members, as well as dispatching their own Aspect warriors into the fray. The ancient tomes in the Black Library told of the return of the Demon Prince. I'm going to just pronounce it Demon. And it fell to the Eldar to vanquish him every 3,000 years. They could trust no one else with this task, especially not the short-sighted humans who had bungled into space so very recently. Of course, the humans always get in the way of everything, and they have such a small picture of what's going on because the stunt of science and technological growth and everything. One of the characters, he was in a spirit stone. So with the Eldar, because if the Eldar die, their souls automatically go to Slaanesh. So they keep their souls in these stones to prevent that from happening. His spirit stone, which had been housed in wraithbone armor for centuries after his physical death, permitting the Great Word to go on living for the sake of the Bel-Tan Eldar, had been destroyed. His death knell rang through the warp like a beacon of lost hope. So yeah, because he's now Slaanesh's. Eldar are still fighting, because they have the Farseer Macha, M-A-C-H-A, trying to fight off the Chaos Cultists. I know I'm not going super in-depth in this, but the prologue, some of the characters' names they mention stuff end up dying. Not really that impactful to the story. And then the humans come, the Imperium comes. And so it's Inquisitor Hordine. I don't think I pronounced it, It's Hordine? Something like that. Was standing forward of the team with her staff of office held proudly aloft. Next to her stood the librarian Prothus, who was spinning his forestaff in a frenzy of sputtering power, sending spears of fire lancing through the darkness ahead of them. I don't know if that's a thing the librarians do, just spinning their staff. I've been meaning when I was playing Dawn of War as the Blood Ravens to kind of like watch the librarian do that, but I haven't, so I gotta figure out if that's still a thing or that's one of those out of lore. And so they investigate what's going on, the Imperium. And so the Avatar is fighting the Demon Prince. Over many millennia, the Eldar have created a weapon to slay demons and banish the forces of chaos from this world. That is the Wailing Doom of Bel-Tan. That is why we are here. Even the smallest fragment could be wrought into a great weapon for the Emperor's Inquisition. So that's what the Imperium's there for, is to get a part of that Wailing Doom. Macha raised her arms to the heavens, holding a small shivering stone of maledictum between her hands. She was whispering and chanting into the blaze that engulfed the sky. Then suddenly, as if on command, the fiery cloud spiraled into a whirlpool and vanished down into the Farseer stone, leaving the scene in stillness and silence. The Avatar of Cain pushed his sword into the air, and the last fork of lightning ruptured the sky, striking the ancient blade as though it were a conductor. The sword flashed momentarily and then shattered with a crack of thunder, sending a shard splinting off the rocks as the Avatar slumped to the ground with the rest of the blade still collapsed in its hand. He lay prone on the mountaintop as the clouds parted, leaving him bathed in starlight. His magnum-like blood oozed slowly from the mountainside as though it were a volcano. On the lower summit, Macha the Farseer collapsed in exhaustion, but she knew that this was not over. She struggled against her exhaustion, trying to warn the warlocks that were rushing to the aid of the Avatar, but she could manage nothing more. A curse on the naive humans. The Imperium intercedes. The librarian picks up a shard of the Avatar's blade, and then they leave with it. Prothesis could not let go of the sword fragment. It was as though it was fused into his grip. He felt weak and drained, and the shard had grown heavier with every hard-fought step. Heavier still after that they had climbed into the Thunderhawk and blasted away from Tartarus. It was as though it wanted to be back with the Eldar, and the whispering wouldn't stop. His mind was peppered with thoughts that were not his own, chattering and debating all around him. But one voice was clear, and the pain was exquisite. Human, you know not what you have done. Right, and that's the end of the prologue. Now we're on chapter 1, which starts
3,000 years later.
Gabriel Angelos, which is the name after the angel Gabriel, who I'm pretty sure was the messenger to Mary, letting her know she was having a kid out of nowhere. The voices soared into angelic chorus, filling the furthest reaches of the space with silver light. It was a divine sound, effable in its beauty and valorous in purpose. The Astronomicon pulsed with life, riddling the Imperium with the light of the Emperor, filling it with perfect sounds of psychic choir. Gabriel held the voices in his head for an instant, thrilling at the touch of this sacred beacon. They filled him with cool light, flooding his soul with promise and salvation. It was like looking into the eyes of the Emperor himself and seeing him gaze back with implacable calm. This is Space King. The only other Warhammer book, 40k book I've read was The Infinite and the Divine. So I haven't seen the Space Marines perspective in 40k. I've only seen it in the Horus Heresy, which is way before people were praising the Emperor, or were starting to, but it didn't become a religion until much later on. So he's having essentially some weird vision, and then someone's calling out his name. The voice was firm and gentle, but was accompanied by a palm that slapped across his face. It's his friend Isidore, who's the librarian of the Blood Ravens. They talk about the Cyrene incident, because it changed Gabriel, and they're heading to Taurus. There's an orc invasion going on, and so they're there to help the planetary forces and eliminate the orcs. And the orcs aren't just there out of the blue. Tartarus itself was no longer the pristine blue and green for which it was famed. It was not a heavily populated world, and there was a lot of agriculture. The atmosphere was usually clear and crisp, providing a perfect view of the verdant surface from orbit. No longer. Even from space, the fires that engulfed the cities could be seen burning with a dirty orange. Great sheets of flame stretched across the arable lands and the wide prairies that rolled between the settlements. Plumes of thick black smoke bellowed into the atmosphere, shutting in the heat and moisture and changing the planet's temperature climate into a stifling, humid monsoon. Dirty orange. I've never heard anything described as dirty orange. Is this another British thing that I don't know about? Because I've never read it anywhere else before. I think this is accurate with Blood Raven lore. It was one of the quirks of the Blood Ravens that each of their battle barges contained its own librarium, and hence each required a team of curators to facilitate its smooth operation. The curators would also record detail of each and every event that took place on the vessel, although they would rely on the testimony and the company librarian for details of missions that took place off-ship. Hence, every barge contained the history and the company that it operated, in addition to copies of more general imperial tomes. Whenever the battle barges rendezvoused with the chapter fortress, copies of every file would be transferred into the central Librarium Centenarium, where only the most senior librarians and the chapter master himself could access to every detail concerning every company. Gabriel had often reflected that his brother librarians were rather fanatical about documentation, and though knowledge and experience were not real, unless they were committed to paper, that is not how that works. Continuing, he knew that the Blood Ravens were the unique amongst all the chapters of the Emperor's Space Marines in being so studiously conscientious, and he was not sure of why this was the case. He had asked Isidore more than once, but had not received a satisfactory response, as though the librarian was worried that he was not entirely trustworthy. He would mutter something about the appropriate designations of knowledge, and then would intone the chapter's maximum. Knowledge is power, got it well. I gotta do some research more in the Blood Ravens, but that sounds like it fits. because they do have that new unique thing about them that they want to go collect relics. I remember this one short, I'll have to find it, where a blood raven is taking a relic alongside with Trizen. He has the relic, and I think it's based off that SpongeBob meme of them running away before they're pulled back and blown up. I'll have to find it. And this has to be some sort of ignorance, of, as though knowledge and experience were not real unless they were committed to paper. It's not how it works, but this is the Imperium. They have a bunch of ignorance. It's frustrating. So I don't think this is an Arthur thing. I think this might be a lore thing. That's frustrating. Because I have knowledge and experience. It's just not down on paper, but it still counts. Alright, and then it goes to the soldiers' view. And they're fighting off the orcs. They have a commander named Brahm, who is killing men who are deserting because of the fear of being killed by the orcs. Which makes sense, and I understand why shooting at deserters, but that seems like a waste of ammo. Well, I think it's a waste of ammo. And then it goes to one guardsman, Kirkaris. So he was kind of being a coward, and then eventually he stands up for himself. There's a little blurb about the orcs. It has no impact on the story, so I don't know why it's written. It shows the orcs being orcs. Wog. Bellowed Orcamungus from the rear of the attack, slapping grunts across the jaw and knocking Hemp clear of the war truck. The war boss pointed up at the sky over the spaceport and roared again, reaching down from his command post and grabbing grunts around the neck. The commando thrashed in resistance, scraping at the war boss with his claws and hissing into his face, but Orcamungus shook him violently by the neck, beating him against the side of the war truck until he stopped kicking. He lifted grunts into the air with one immense arm, stuffing the snarling face towards the sky above the battle for the spaceport. Crumbling to the ground with resounding crash, grunts murdered under his breath, spitting globbles of saliva and blood from his jagged mouth. "Yours the boss," he spluttered, and pulling himself to his feet and thudding off to join the rest of his commandos. Doesn't really do anything with the story, but this is super orcs. Because I remember some scenes playing the campaign where they're doing this. I know since it's based on the campaign, I don't know if that's the reason why he wrote it in here, because it's supposed to follow it. But other than that, it wasn't really needed, because the orcs don't get followed around too much, and eventually they become not as impactful in the story as we go on. So yeah, I forgot that they are fighting over a spaceport, because obviously you get the spaceport, no reinforcements. It feels like the Imperium is losing, and then the Blood Ravens show up and actually give them some backup. Cartoons. So this is a sergeant of the Materia. The Adeptus Materialum. I think it's how it's pronounced. So much Latin. Cartman's jaw dropped in awe when he realized what these monstrous warriors were. They were the Adeptus Astartes, the Emperor's Space Marines. These soldiers were handpicked from the elite of the galaxy's fighting men and then surgically augmented for years until they are finally implanted with a black carapace that ran under their entire skin, permitting them to interface completely with the ancient power armor that enwrapped them like a second skin. Carton had heard the legends, but he never thought he would live to actually see one. Space Marines are my favorite faction in the whole 40k, other than like the Necrons. So I forget that most normal humans don't ever get to see one in their lifetime. So this fits the lore, it seems like. Doesn't seem way out there or anything. The orcs are back at it. Now they have something really challenging to fight. And obviously orcs being orcs, they really like that. We're getting into the part this just irks me so much. "Colonel," cried Kirksis, staring in horror at Brahm. Okay, Brahm's a colonel, not a commander. As his hellgun coughed, savagely into the gut of a charging orc, dropping it to the ground amid squeals of frustration. Guns do not cough. Ignorance is bliss, so I'm not looking up if it's actual thing. But guns do not cough. I've never read anywhere else where guns cough. I've read other 40k books, well, the Horus Heresy. I don't remember them saying guns coughed. I've read other war books like All Quiet on the Western Front. They never say that the weapons cough. Guns, weapons, bolters do not cough. This is the first one. You can drink. You can take a shot every time there's the word cough with the guns. It's so irking to me. Guns don't cough. So the orcs go and retreat, not because they're scared, but to, regroup. And so now it's the soldiers and the Marines. They are still defending the spaceport. And that is the end of chapter 1. If you're reading this book, if this is your very first book into the Warhammer universe, put it down and read something else, because you are going to be lost. Because thankfully I had played the campaign, so I have an understanding of what's going on, and I've been into the lore for a couple of years, so I have a baseline of where, like, okay, that makes sense, and nothing was super new to me. Hey, editing Warhammer Women here. I gotta put this into parts, because had I done both books together as one review, the video would have been 7 hours long. And I don't know about any of you guys.
Ain't nobody got time for that.
So I'm gonna just break it up into parts. So the book that I read compared to the Dawn of War, we won't be getting to for a while. So you're gonna just have to wait and see. And this gives you guys kind of something to look forward to each time. I'm not sure if I'm gonna post this series weekly, as it's taken me much longer to edit than I thought it would. But we will get there when we get there. So thanks for listening. God bless and Emperor protects.